General Freakley, thank you so much for finding the time to talk to us today, and welcome to the Independence Avenue Media Studio. I really appreciate this.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I appreciate your work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To our viewers, I would like to introduce who you are. You're a highly decorated retired general, Lieutenant General Ben Freakley, who spent 36 years in the U.S. Army and very, very impressive military career. He served in the Operation of Desert Storm, Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. Currently, General Freakley is a professor of practice and leadership at ASU and a special advisor to the ASU president Michael Crow, and he's also a co-founder of the ASU Laboratory for Leadership, Diplomacy, and National Security. So to our viewers, now you understand why we wanted to talk to General Freakley today, and we're going to talk about something a bit general but also very important and timely, and it's the role of the U.S. military in America in general, governance, society, you name it. So, General Freakley, what do you think the role of U.S. military is in America? And this is a very wide question, of course, so take it the
Sure.
way you want.
Well, I think the founding fathers got it right with the U.S. Constitution when they said that the United States Congress shall raise and equip an army. The idea behind the thinking was a part of democracy was to have a military that was subservient to civilian control. So one of our principles of our military is we are responsible to our civilian leaders who are elected by our people. And we're an element of democracy to preserve and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That's our basic role, to preserve our form of government if required.
We are witnessing something that does not happen very often in the U.S. in general. There are U.S. Marines deployed to California right now. Can you explain that? What happened? Why are they there?
Well, first, to back up just for a moment, I think it's important for people to understand that we have a very serious principle of civil and military relations. And that goes back to my point about civilian control of our military. We also have a law, posse comitatus, that prevents the active duty military from enforcing United States law. And it's very domestically. And it's been used very sparingly in the 250 years of our Army. It was used to enforce integration in a state in the 1950s when the 101st Airborne Division escorted young black women to school when a state did not want to enforce federal law for integrating children being access to any school. But it's been very sparingly. So the 200 Marines were deployed behind the National Guard of California. So the first step that took place was the deployment of California National Guardsmen who are actually state military until federalized by the United States government. And then to back them up, the Marines were sent to guard federal installations. It is a question that will be examined. Is it overreach or not? There are some issues with it. First of all, the governor of California did not request military intervention, both did not use his own National Guard, California National Guard, and did not use the Marines. That was done at the federal level. So there is some concern that there was going to be some vandalism from the rioting and the protests. And so the president and administration decided to use military force. It's questionable, in my opinion, when we examine our tradition of civil military relations, it's questionable. The better approach, my recommendation if someone was asking me, would be if the local police and the federal and the state police cannot handle a situation, which of course Americans have the right to protest, they have the right to assemble, they have the freedom of speech. Those are all rights that our military protects from the Bill of Rights of the Constitution. But it should have been that the police and the state police were requested to maintain order and the safety of the public while they assembled. And if they were unable to do so, the governor should have used his own National Guard. And if the National Guard were not able to control the situation, then federal troops could be used to protect federal property, not enforce the law, but protect federal property. And I think we're in a very gray zone right now with the use of our military in this manner. And I would say it shouldn't have been done. From a soldier's perspective, I would recommend it.
Yeah,
Don't go this way. Would be my recommendation if that's what was determined.
so that's what I was going to ask you. As a soldier, as a general, would you um, could could a soldier refuse an order like that, where it's in a gray zone, there is no specific sort of law prohibiting it, but it's still in the gray zone?
Well, the short answer is yes. From basic training, when a civilian citizen comes into our military, they're taught right away in basic training there are two orders they can disobey. In fact, they have a duty to fulfill their moral obligation. They have a duty to disobey two types of orders: an illegal order or an immoral order. Now, that's hard because then you're taking all the American population and you're assuming they have a similar set of ethics, which they may or may not have. But the soldiers are taught the values of the military, they're taught to enforce those values, and they're taught that they can disobey an immoral or illegal order. So even as a general, I can say I view that to be illegal or immoral, and I'm not going to follow that order.
What happens if a general says that or a soldier says that?
Well, it can be that then there's a legal review on the legality of the order, and the general or the soldier could be ordered then to carry out the order, or it could go the other way. An example is Abu Ghraib, the prison scandal in Iraq. The U.S. Army, it's a huge stain on my generation. We were in charge, but a military unit mistreated our fellow humans. Fellow human beings in the Abu Ghraib prison, and they were carrying out these orders. But it was a young soldier who initially went to his chain of command and said, "This is not right," and they didn't listen to him. And then he went to the media, and the media reported it, and then higher level military said, "This is not right." The soldier was exonerated. Many members that were involved in that scandal were court-martialed and or retired immediately from the U.S. Army. So it can go one of two ways, depending upon the legal ruling.
So you're working on the issue of leadership in the military and in general issues of leadership. So who does the leadership fall on when you have situations like this? When there is an illegal or immoral order, can any soldier do that, or do they need to work it up to their chain of command? And what's the officer's role in all this?
Well, we follow a set of laws called the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which come from the Constitution. And the purpose of the Uniform Code of Military Justice is to maintain good order and discipline in our military. So they will follow ethical orders, so they will be legal, so they will use force proportionally and correctly, and follow the values of America. And so any soldier can, at any rank, can say this is an immoral or illegal order, and then it will be looked at by the lawyers in the military, and then the leadership falls on all of us to follow the rules. When I was a cadet at West Point, I took a semester of constitutional and law. All of us were required to. And one of the aspects of being a soldier and a leader is if you know that something violates the Uniform Code of Military Justice, it is your duty to report it. And if you do not report it, then you have violated the law yourself. So the generals can only say, I don't recommend we do this, or we're not going to do this. If the law says you have to do it, then they either do it or they retire or resign, if you're a general.
Yeah. You've been in the military for 36 years before retiring. So that's an incredible career. And of course, you've seen incredible things, and you held many very important posts and positions in overseas operations. Do you notice any change and how the U.S. military feels about itself or about its role?
When the U.S. military came out of Vietnam, it was a very troubled and fractured time in our society. And as you know, there were a lot of anti-war demonstrations, anti-Vietnam demonstrations. Soldiers were told not to wear their uniform off their military post. They were spit on. They were called baby killers. It was a very hard time. There's a famous European war philosopher named von Clausewitz. And Clausewitz wrote about the Napoleonic time, but he's written the most important work called On War. And in it, Clausewitz says that it's critical to maintain an equilateral triangle of the people, the government, and the military. And they have to trust each other. The people have to trust the military to defend them, and they put their daughters and sons in the military because they trust them. The military trusts the government to use the military correctly and proportionally and in law. And the government and the people have to trust the government, and the government has to trust the people. So that was broken. That whole concept was broken during Vietnam. And it took years. And I came in right after Vietnam, and many of the generals and the senior non-commissioned officers, the sergeants and others, they rebuilt our army and rebuilt the trust in our army, our military with the American people, because we did a lot of introspection. We have not done a lot of introspection about Iraq and Afghanistan. We have moved on to say there's other threats, there's other challenges. We're looking at Iran, Iraq to a degree, but mostly China, Russia, North Korea. And we've sort of not dealt with how did we do in Iraq and Afghanistan across the board, and what do we need to improve and be better. Mm-hmm. Additionally, the characteristics of warfare, the nature of warfare, man killing man, hasn't changed since someone took a rock and hit another man, but the characteristics of warfare are rapidly changing, as we see in particular in Ukraine. But as we see across the world, we see war often was, in the beginning, was on land, and then it was on land and sea during the British Empire, and then it was on land, sea, and air with the invention of the airplane. But now it's gone to information, your field of work, and it's gone into cyber, and it's gone into space, and so this dimension of the battlefield has changed dramatically. Both from the ground and undersea all the way up into space, and then in these cybersecurity information operations, space operations, have changed the characteristics of war greatly. And I think our army, our military in particular, is trying to find our way through that. It's a bit of a fog, and say what should we be, what technology should we use, how should we change the use of the soldier, the Marine, the sailor, the airman, the guardian from the Space Force. And what can we learn from Ukraine rapidly and innovate rapidly to be as prepared as we can? We are not rapid innovators in the U.S. military. It takes us 10 years or more. And with Moore's laws and the rapid innovation that is taking place, by the time we invent something, it's out of use. We just fielded a tank called the Booker, and it was just starting to be deployed. And then the current administration said, cancel it.
So drone technology seems to be the feature of the military and warfighting, at least based on, for the most part, I should say, based on what we're seeing in Ukraine, of course, where Ukraine, with a sort of low cost, high effectiveness, is using these drones. And we just not too long ago, we saw how Ukrainian drone operation called the Spiderweb took out 30% of Russia's strategic bomber capabilities. That's incredible. So do you think U.S. military is paying attention to this? And what would you, if it was up to you, what would you wish for in this regard to speed up the process?
You make some great points, and you cover a lot of broad things right there. First of all, I don't believe that there's any magic solution to combat. Combat is hard work, and it's using the tools that you have effectively and properly to dominate your opponent. There's not a magic solution. Everybody's thought over time they've had a solution. When we get this tank, we'll own the battlefield. Well, then people built a bigger anti-tank weapon. The British for a long time, others thought that cavalry ruled the battlefield, and so men on horses would dominate. So I think we ought to be careful about getting trapped around the magic of a drone, although it is really changing, to your point, the characteristics of warfare. I think one of the fascinating things to me is looking at the whole system, not the drone itself. But just imagine, Ukrainian fighters are using GoFundMe to generate funds to buy parts. They're using the worldwide supply web to order parts. They're assembling the drones in their forward trenches. They're configuring those to do reconnaissance or kinetic strikes. And then at the basic level, they are doing these strategic things of destroying 30% of an opponent's bomber force. It's fascinating. There's a lot of things that come into it. Who controls it? Who says yes? Who says no? What limits do you put on innovation, or do you just let it go? But the problem, I think, with our military is we're so slow to change. We're not innovators. We're stuck in the past. We often, by the time we get our innovation right, we've moved beyond that, and it's the next fight. We've often said we often are very prepared for the last war, not the next war. But I think we should be looking at things like microtechnology, swarms of capability that can come at you with microtechnology. I think we need to take a hard look at robotics and look at all the things that robots can do, might do, should do. We need to integrate artificial intelligence. We need to think about drone, but we need to think equally about information warfare, cyber warfare. We need to think about how do we present so much complexity to our opponent that we can dominate them and stop the fighting as soon as possible, because we're decisive, we're effective, and we get the job done. I mean, to me, this strike in Iran, from a strategic perspective of if you are one of our opponents and you see that these bombers came from multiple directions, starting from the United States, put massive munitions down small manhole covers, one right behind the other, and a submarine that you didn't even know was near you shot 30 plus cruise missiles, you have to ask yourself, can I do that? I'm a rugby player. So I watch the All Blacks in New Zealand. And so when America kind of puts a team up, I'm like, why do we think we can compete with the All Blacks? They're untouchable. Well, that's, to me, if I was an opponent of America and I saw what just happened, I would be scratching my head about how do we deal with that? So we need to be... We need to be faster with innovation. My overall point is look at all technology, look at all emerging things, be faster, but integrate. The big difference in the Second World War is the Germans got the integration of the Stuka aircraft, the tank, and the radio right and changed the tempo of war. The French got it wrong and were defeated in a month. So it's not only it's like cooking. If you get the ingredients right, you have a beautiful pastry. If you get it wrong, it goes in the trash.
But could the opponents looking at, so you mentioned that Midnight Hammer is something that everybody should think about when they think about maybe challenging America. But don't you think they would also be looking at the spider web in Ukraine and saying, well, yeah, Russia had this huge, if not the largest, second largest strategic bomber fleet, and look what the Ukrainians did with very, very low cost, basically undetected until the very last second. So how do you deal with that? Looking at one and looking at the other. I know it's an impossible question probably to answer.
I mean,
Still, your thoughts on this would be great.
Just like journalists continue studying the environment that they're reporting in and the changes of what's happening in their field of study, or doctors look at the advancement in medicine, military professionals need to study the art of war. They need to study what is happening. They need to project that forward and say, how can this be used? I mean, one of the fascinating things to me about Ukraine is the galvanizing national will, that the people of Ukraine, the women and men, the children, are standing firm against Russia. And so I think you have to think about how do you marshal national will to stand strong when an existential threat wants to take your way of life away. But yes, I think studying all militaries, studying all theorists and from universities, from think tanks that are talking about diplomacy and information and warfare, these things have to be studied, thought about, and projected correctly into the future to be effective for your country.
Our time is unfortunately up, but I do appreciate your thoughts and spending this time with us. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.